My favorite, and I believe the best all-time baseball announcer, Vince Scully, says, hello to you wherever you may be, and we're glad that you have joined us. And I want to talk a little bit about why this started and what's going to happen. But first, I would like to introduce my colleague, who is my webmaster and all-around nice guy. And on top of that, he does a good job, David McKinney. So David, want to say hello?
Hi, hello everybody. I'm really glad to be here, and thanks for joining us. This is our first Facebook Live and as well as first Zoom here on Facebook and Zoom meeting. So we're glad you're here. I'll be in the background, and at the end when we are ready for some questions, be glad to help us facilitate that. So take it away, Michael.
So David is our monitor and keeper of all things, and we'll do what he needs to do to make sure that we answer your questions, and we'll have time for that. So what is going on here is that I use a program called Zoom, and through Zoom there's a way to create a webinar, which we have now done. Some people are actually in our Zoom meeting room, but the intent here is to be able to broadcast this through Facebook Live, and we can look at other options as well. But the idea is to do this through Facebook Live so that anyone who is out there on Facebook and not in the Zoom conference can hear this presentation, and you can ask questions. So people in the Zoom meeting can actually ask questions. If they have microphones, they can, and we'll unmute you at the time, be unmuted and ask questions, or you can write in the Zoom chat box. If you're on Facebook Live, you'll be able to ask questions by going to the comment section and writing in whatever questions that you have, and we will then move forward and make sure we get them answered. Plan is to go until just about 5 o'clock our time, so that's about 55 minutes from now. The way this all began was last week I put out an announcement on Facebook, and I said there are lots of people out there who are sending me emails every day, and I'm sure sending other people's email every day saying, this is what you have to do now. Here's how you can grow your business. I get tons of them every single day, and I know that they all contain valuable information. And I try to look at them and try to assimilate as much of that information as I can. The thing is that a lot of times I'm also getting emails I have no interest in. And it made me think about the fact that maybe what I could do as a speaker was to take a different tact. And that was to say to all of you on Facebook where this began, what do you want me to talk about? Now, why do people want to know what I want to talk about? I guess that's up to each individual to decide for themselves. But as many of you may know, I used to work in New York City some 18 and a half years ago in the World Trade Center and escaped with my guide dog, Roselle, who I believe you can see behind me. That is a picture painted by Ron Burns, one of the world's foremost animal artists. And he painted that of Roselle. Actually, posthumously, he did it from lots of photos. But we were in the World Trade Center and we escaped on September 11th. Ever since that day, I have been traveling the world by request to speak, to talk about a variety of topics like trust, teamwork, leadership. I talk about blindness a lot. I talk about guide dogs. And I talk about turning the tables on terrorism. That's one of my favorite speech topics. And a variety of different kinds of subjects. And so I have things that I can say, but I really wanted to address what all of you wanted and would want me to talk about. So this will be the first of its kind. I'm also looking to do virtual presentations to companies and corporations. And as I always have as a speaker, would want to charge for that, but we work out budgets and numbers with whoever wants me to come and speak. I don't have a set hardline fee because I probably think I'm worth more than some people do today. So we want to work with people, but right now all this is going to be at no charge. I put out the announcement, and within a few minutes, here is what came back from one person. Mr. Hingson, what an amazing offer you have made. My question is, how do you maintain a positive outlook and not become overwhelmed by the events surrounding us. I know you said not to give in to what you cannot control, but nothing seems in control right now. Am I affecting someone else negatively? Is that other person a danger to me? The rule book has gone out the window. What are the rules for entering and exiting doorways? I'm a door holder and I say please and thank you. Parentheses, but at a convenience store today, I did none of that. I don't like this unknown territory and don't know how to react. Okay, that's a great question. And I thought that's what we would talk about today. She wrote that because I oftentimes in my talks and in fact in my Facebook post said, don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on running with, well, in the case of people, focus on what you can control and the rest will take care of itself. I'll tell the story very quickly, a story behind that. As Tower 2 was collapsing about 100 yards away from me on September 11th, I turned with my guide dog Roselle and began to run. And I thought immediately, God, I can't believe that you got us out of a building just to have it collapse on us. And as soon as I thought that, literally, as well as you are hearing me today, a voice in my head said, don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on running with Roselle and the rest will take care of itself. And I had a sense of confidence and absolute certainty that if we worked together, we would be okay. There's a lot more to the story with things that happened later, but the bottom line is that in reality, Roselle and I worked together and we survived and made it home, and the rest is kind of history. So in thinking about the question, one of the concepts that came to mind to me is something that former President Jimmy Carter has said, which is, we must adjust to changing times while holding to unwavering principles. The fact of the matter is, we do have a lot more control than we think we do. And we need to look at what our principles, our life moral compass is, our method of operations. And everyone may be a little bit different than everyone else, but we still hold to unwavering principles. I could make this real simple. What's wrong with holding doors for people and not holding doors for people? Could that other person be a danger? Gee, do you have control over that? On the other hand, can you hold that door open for someone and still remain 6 feet away from them, which is the physical distance that people suggest that we maintain from each other? And probably if you can't stay 6 feet away, I wouldn't hold the door, and there's nothing wrong with that. The point is that you want to hold that door open. You want to do things for people, but the reality is the rules for the moment are a little bit different, and we can't do things the way we have done them in the past. Do we have control over that? Well, you could hold the door open, but the reality is I don't think that we have too much control over that. The virus has dictated it. The COVID-19 virus and what medical science and so many people have observed already is that you need to stay 6 feet away from people to maintain safety. So probably not going to hold a door for someone like you used to do. And that really is okay. On the other hand, if there is someone who can't open a door, you can make the choice as to whether you want to move close enough to open the door for that person. But you control your thoughts and your actions. No one else does. Running away from the World Trade Center, and the story I just told you was probably the most scared I was on that day. But the fact of the matter is that when the airplane hit the building, I, for one, did not begin to panic because I had spent a lot of time learning how to travel around the World Trade Center. And yes, I learned how to do that as a blind person, but I think that's something that is a lesson for all of us. I learned where things were. I didn't have to rely on signs. And in fact, I created a mindset in my brain that dealt with emergencies. And almost every day I went into the World Trade Center, I thought, what am I going to do today if there's an emergency? Well, there was an emergency one day. And because I had spent so much time thinking about it and preparing, I was able to spring into action and not be panicked. I also tend to be that way, I think, somewhat anyway. But the reality is, I have control over my reaction. I had control over whether I panicked or not. And there was someone, a colleague of mine, David Frank, and I'll tell you David's story at some time in the future in one of these if you'd like. But David was shouting, Mike, oh my God, there's fire and smoke above us. We got to get out of the World Trade Center right now. We got to get out of here. And I wasn't panicking, and David was. David eventually focused, and we moved on and did the things we needed to do. But the fact is, we each have that kind of control no matter what. The coronavirus is here. We don't have control over the fact that it's here. We have some control over whether it's going to affect us in terms of whether we catch it or not. And we know what seem to be the basic rules to keep us safe. So we stay away from each other by 6 feet. We wash our hands regularly. And now we're starting to hear health professionals talking about wearing masks. And did they lie to us before and say you don't need to wear a mask? I don't think so. I think that the knowledge base is growing, and now we're learning that it probably makes sense to wear a mask. Is that mask going to keep you from getting the virus? Probably not. Is it going to make it less likely that you will catch the virus? Probably yes, especially depending on the type of mask. My wife is a quilter, and she's going to start making masks for people. The material that she's going to use will include a layer that is not porous, and so the coronavirus will not be able to get through that part of it. It will get through the cotton part if it misses cotton threads, which it can do because the virus droplets are very small. But the fact of the matter is that she's going to make masks, and probably it makes sense to wear a mask because every little bit of protection helps. And the fact that medical science didn't tell us that before, what good is it going to do us to say, medical science, you lied before? And besides that, we don't know whether they lied. We may not like the fact that now they're changing their minds, but you know what? A lot of people have changed their minds about this virus, and we change our minds about so many things in our lives. And other people change their minds, and that affects us in some way, and we don't have control over how they change their minds and what they change their minds about. We have to decide how that's going to affect us, and we each individually have that choice to make. We have a lot more control over our individual worlds than we think we do, but it starts with learning not to fear. It starts with learning to be strategic, and it starts with you deciding that I'm going to take control over those things in my life that I can control, whatever they are. And that is a decision that each of us have to make. We have to look at the things that go on in our lives and decide if we have control over them. We can decide whether we're going to be afraid, whether we're going to be angry, whether we're going to be more strategic and remain calm, or none of those. I personally believe the more we fear, the more paralyzed we become, and the result of that is the more of an inability we have to think and make strategic decisions. And make no mistake about it, in our world today, thinking strategically and thinking intelligently and clearly is the most important thing that any of us can do. If we allow fear to overcome us, we'll lose the ability to do that. And the result will be that we won't have control because we will have given it up. But we have the ability to control so many things in our lives. And I hope that everyone will recognize that you all have that same ability. You all have that same inner strength to control the things that you can. So how do we retake control when we think we don't have it? Well, the first thing to do is to decide you're going to take control and to start to think about what you have control over. We need to calm down. There are a lot of people that talk about meditation. I've been meditating for many, many years, and there are different types of meditation. If anyone has ever read 10% Happier by Dan Harris, who is a Good Morning America host, you will have learned about some different kinds of meditations in that book. If you haven't read it, I urge you to go get it somewhere and read it, and then start to put it into practice. Meditation in its simplest form can be as easy as just sitting down in a quiet place, closing your eyes, and not thinking about anything specifically. And if you start to think about those issues over which you are afraid, force your brain and your mind to get away from that and just let it drift. Just don't do anything. The Bible supports that, by the way, but we won't get into that kind of religious discussion right now. And I suspect that all religions would tell you the same thing. The reality is you have to take that control over your feelings that will allow you to calm down. Once you start to control your fears, you are then in a much better position to be able to start to decide how you want to proceed over one thing and another. And I think that all of that is available to you. I think that meditation is the most important way that I can suggest that any of us slow down, calm down, relax, and begin to think in a more positive and a more controlling way in our own lives. Then you can also do other things. Like if you do something and you wonder to yourself, did I do the right thing there? Which is part of what the questioner asked. Step back, step out of what's going on and look at it. In other words, be self-analytical. I remember when I worked at KUCI, our campus radio station at UC Irvine, go Anteaters. When I worked at KUCI, one of the things that I instituted as program director one year was to record everyone's radio shows, specifically the talking part of their shows. And we insisted that everyone listen to their shows, listen to what they said. Why did we do that? I did that a bunch. And I realized I am my own worst critic. And if I can listen to something or later look at anything that I do, and I can say to myself truly, I did a good job, or I did a good job. Here's where I can improve. I am going to be my own worst critic every single time, but I learned to step back and I learned to ask myself the questions and try to be objective about what I did. And again, I think every person listening to this, every person in the world can do that same thing. If you're not sure, step back and look at it. You've got a moral compass. You know what's right and what's wrong. You know what works and doesn't work if you have learned to calm down and think about it. And if you do that, if you really think, then you can step back and you can say, was that the right thing to do? Should I have opened that door for that person or not? Should I have helped that person in other ways? By the way, one of the other parts of the questions was please and thank you. I don't see any reason never to do that. You don't get the coronavirus from saying please and thank you, by the way. And I think that one of the things that we often don't do nearly as much as we should is to smile. I've heard it said that it takes 17 muscles to frown and only 3 to smile. And if that's true, and I'm not a biologist, but if that's true and I'll buy it, then for heaven's sakes, it's a whole lot easier to smile. And saying please and thank you often leads to smiles. But I think that those are simple ways that you can start to take some control over what you do and over your life and get yourself to the point where you are in a better position to be able to look at what you do, analyze what you do, and decide how best you can function, as well as how you can help other people.